Night pressed down on the coast like a velvet shroud, muffling the sighs of the sea and the distant hollow cries of seabirds that lingered long after dusk. The air, damp and heavy, carried the brine of salt and something older, a scent that clung to the rocks and crept beneath the doorways of the weathered rental house perched above the crashing surf. Inside, 5 friends, each gathered from different corners of their tangled lives, shared the brittle warmth of laughter and the sharp tang of cheap wine. They had come seeking respite from the machinery of city existence, from jobs that gnawed at them, relationships that scabbed over but never healed, and the endless, low hum of anxiety that had become the background music of adulthood. Outside, the ocean was a living thing, restless and insomniac. It battered the cliffs in slow, methodical rhythms, as if remembering old wounds. The friends, Eva, tense and secretive. Rowan, brash and desperately cheerful. Marcus, quietly observant. Lila, always on the verge of tears she refused to show. And Jonah, whose silences were deeper than the tide pools, were drawn to the liminality of the place, the sense that the world ended here, at the edge of the land, and something else began. The cliffs themselves loomed, dark and indifferent, their faces scarred by centuries of wind and spray. From their vantage, the world seemed raw and unfinished, as if the coastline were a wound that refused to close. It was on the second night, well after midnight, when conversation had ebbed into uneasy quiet, that the song began. At first it was so faint that Eva thought she'd imagined it, a thin, wavering melody drifting in through the salt-streaked glass. She held her breath, listening, but when she glanced at the others, their eyes were already fixed on the windows, wide and uncertain. The music was neither human nor instrument, but something in between, a voice that was not a voice, rising and falling with the wind, impossibly sad and strangely beautiful. It wound through the rooms, coiling beneath the laughter, curling into their dreams. If you're feeling the chills, subscribe for more scary stories. No one spoke for a long time. The fire in the grate hissed and spat, shadows shuddering on the walls. It was Jonah, finally, who broke the silence, his voice flat and distant. Is that someone singing? They all strained to listen, but the song seemed to slip away at the edges, never quite letting itself be caught. Outside, the cliffs were lost in darkness, their outlines swallowed by mist. Restlessness took root among them. Rowan, ever the skeptic, tried to laugh it off, but his voice was brittle. Lila clung to the edge of her seat, nails digging into the worn fabric. Marcus muttered about wind and echoes, but his words felt hollow. Ava pressed her palm to the window, feeling the cold seep into her bones. The melody persisted, threading through their nerves, beckoning without urgency, as if it had all the time in the world. By morning, the song was gone, leaving behind a residue of unease that clung to their skin. Breakfast was a silent affair, punctuated by sidelong glances and forced smiles. No one admitted to hearing it in their dreams, though the haunted look in their eyes betrayed them. The cliffs outside were unchanged, the sea indifferent to their confusion, but something had shifted. Some unspoken agreement that the normal rules no longer applied here. Enjoyed the story? Hit like and share with someone who loves a good scare. Their curiosity was a living thing now, sharp and insistent. What could produce a sound so mournful, so impossibly old? The locals, when pressed at the small market in town, offered only evasive answers and nervous shrugs, their eyes flicking to the horizon as if afraid of what might be listening. The friends' unease curdled into obsession, and as night fell again, the air grew thick with anticipation, dread, and the inexorable pull of the song that had slipped unbidden into their lives. The boundary between what was known and what was waiting beyond the cliffs had thinned, and in the hush before darkness, the friends found themselves poised on the edge of something vast, hungry, and utterly indifferent to their hopes or fears. As dusk fell once more, the atmosphere inside the house thickened with a tension that hovered just out of reach, like an itch beneath the skin. The friends, driven by a compulsion they barely acknowledged, followed the twisting path along the cliff edge, each step crunching over brittle grass and ancient stones half swallowed by earth. The sea's voice was different now, guttural and impatient, as if irritated by their intrusion. In the waning light, the cliffs appeared almost skeletal, ribs of rock jutting from the earth's flesh, their surfaces carved with patterns that might have been the work of water or something older and far less comprehensible. Moving deeper into the wild, Ava noticed strange remnants scattered along the path, bundles of seaweed braided with feathers, tiny bones threaded on string, and stones blackened by fire. Each artifact pulsed with an uneasy significance, hinting at rituals performed in secrecy and desperation. Now, examine the way these tokens altered the group's dynamic. Lila, ever sensitive, recoiled from touching them, while Rowan's bravado frayed, his jokes dying in his throat. Marcus, analytical to a fault, tried cataloging each object, but his hands trembled, betraying the fact that logic was a brittle shield against the unknown. Jonah trailed the group, his gaze fixed on the horizon, as if expecting answers to rise from the churning gray. Comment what you think will happen in the next chapter. Consequently, the discovery of a half-buried stone altar, etched with crude spirals and the suggestion of faces eroded by centuries of wind, forced a new awareness upon them. Here the ground felt different, spongy, yielding, as if the earth itself breathed beneath their feet. Wax stubs and decayed offerings were scattered around the altar's base, the scent of tallow mingling with the briny air. The group hesitated, each caught in a private calculus of fear and fascination, the notion that something had been summoned. Here, something that demanded sacrifice hung over them, thick and unspoken. Pushing closer, Marcus uncovered a faded scrap of parchment sealed beneath a stone. The symbols, unfamiliar and jagged, seemed to twist when viewed out of the corner of one's eye. Rowan, attempting bravado, muttered about local legends and pranksters, but his words faded as the parchment symbols seemed to pulse with a malignant intent. For the first time, uncertainty fractured their unity. Suspicion flickered between them, each wondering who among them might have been drawn to this place for reasons unspoken. The hidden fault lines of their friendship widened, invisible currents of blame and paranoia threading through the group. This story still has so much more. Subscribe so you don't miss out. Another crucial layer emerged as Ava, compelled by a mixture of dread and curiosity, reached out to touch the altar. Her skin prickled with cold so profound it felt as though something had pulled the heat from her marrow. The others watched, transfixed as wind picked up, carrying with it the faintest trace of that same haunting melody, now closer, threaded with a note of hunger. The boundaries between what was natural and what was conjured blurred, and the sense of being watched pressed upon them, relentless. In this moment, the cliffs ceased to be mere landscape and became an entity, sentient, expectant, and impossibly ancient. The ritual detritus, the altar, the song itself. These were not relics of a forgotten past, but living instruments tuned to the frequency of fear and longing. The friends, standing exposed beneath the vast, indifferent sky, felt the weight of their own insignificance. The world they had known receded, replaced by a realm shaped by ritual, sacrifice, and the ever-present possibility that the cliffs demanded not merely attention, but tribute. A restless energy began to infiltrate the group's days, as if the Very air were saturated with static. Each member felt it differently. For Lila, the world started to blur at the edges, colors running together as she tried to read or cook, her thoughts dissolving mid-sentence. Rowan became irritable, snapping at the others over trivialities, his laughter now sharp as broken glass. Marcus, once precise and methodical, found himself losing time. Hours would slip by while he stared at the endlessly shifting sea, his mind empty except for a single recurring note that hummed beneath his skull. Eva, too, experienced a subtle but unshakable shift. The taste of seawater ghosted on her tongue, and the wind seemed to whisper in a cadence she couldn't quite decipher. Jonah, always the quietest, grew quieter still, his gaze tracking something, invisible just beyond the window, eyes hollowed by sleeplessness and a secret dread. Do you dare to watch until the end? Subscribe to see what's next. While daytime offered some fragile reprieve, the song asserted itself with renewed force each night. It did not simply echo from the cliffs, but seemed to seep from the very walls, crawling into their beds, their pockets, their mouths. The melody twisted, at times sorrowful, at other times sharp with longing, but always insistent. None of them spoke openly of the song's progression, yet their behaviors betrayed a shared, mounting desperation. Meals were abandoned, half-eaten, conversations derailed by sudden silences, each friend searching the other's faces for signs of weakness or complicity. Leave a like if you can't take your eyes off the screen. As the nights wore on, the friends' dreams transformed into labyrinths of sound and shadow. In these nocturnal wanderings, Eva found herself wandering a labyrinth of corridors carved from salt, chased by a presence that never revealed itself, but pressed ever closer. Marcus dreamed of mouths opening in the cliffs, swallowing words and memories, leaving him mute and trembling. Lila's dreams grew tactile, her arms tangled in seaweed, her lungs filling with cold water, waking her. With a scream she stifled in her pillow. Even Rowan, who mocked his own unease, awoke to the taste of blood and salt, convinced he'd bitten his tongue, though no wound could be found. Against this backdrop, the group's relationships fractured and reassembled in strange ways. Tensions that once simmered beneath the surface now erupted as accusations and confessions. Rowan accused Marcus of humming the tune under his breath, while Lila wept openly, pleading for someone to help her silence the noise. Eva withdrew, her voice clipped and brittle, while Jonah simply vanished for hours at a time, returning with sand in his hair and an unfocused stare. The song had become a wedge, driving them apart while binding them to a shared fate they could neither name nor escape. Yet within this turmoil, a peculiar intimacy emerged. The friends found themselves drawn together in moments of mutual vulnerability, sharing haunted glances, clutching each other's hands when the melody peaked, whispering half-remembered reassurances in the dark. Paradoxically, the song's intrusion stripped away their defenses, exposing raw nerves and old wounds. In the flickering candlelight, secrets spilled forth. Lila's fear of abandonment, Marcus's shame over past betrayals, Eva's unresolved grief, Rowan's buried self-doubt, Jonah's silent guilt. Each confession was met with silence, not judgment, as if the group instinctively recognized the futility of blame in the face of something so vast and inhuman. If you're scared too, hit like and share with your friends. Shifting alliances formed and dissolved, echoing the tides below. Some, like Lila and Eva, clung together in resistance, devising rituals, earplugs, white noise, whispered prayers, to ward off the song's influence. Others, like Jonah and Marcus, began to surrender, drawn to the melody's promise of release, their eyes vacant, their voices eerily harmonious when they spoke. The group's unity, once a shield against the world's cruelties, now became a brittle chain, each link strained by the relentless, unanswerable call of the cliffs. Through every waking hour and fevered dream, the song pressed on, an invisible tide rising to claim what it had been promised. Want more stories like this? Subscribe now and prepare for the worst. As the days bled into one another, the friends found a new edge to their fear. The world itself seemed to warp around them, as if the cliffs and sea were no longer indifferent but actively complicit in their unraveling. The landscape, once a place of solace and grandeur, now hinted at betrayal. A dense fog drifted in from the water, not dissipating with the sun's rise but lingering, thick and tactile, muffling sound and obscuring every familiar landmark. Paths they'd walked just days before twisted inexplicably, doubling back in. Impossible loops, so that the very act of moving through the world became a test of memory and will. The boundaries between inside and outside blurred. Salt crusted their skin even when they hadn't left the house, and the damp air pressed in, heavy as a shroud. Within this shifting reality, each friend confronted their own private reckoning. Eva, whose skepticism had always been her armor, began experiencing hallucinations she could neither dismiss nor explain away. In mirrors, her own reflection would sometimes mouth words out of sync with her thoughts, lips moving to the rhythm of that persistent, unplaceable melody. Rowan, ever the leader, found his confidence turn to quicksand. He'd try to rally the group, to organize some rational solution, only for his voice to catch in his throat, strangled by doubt. The others would watch, silent and expectant, as if waiting for permission to surrender to the strangeness overtaking them. Meanwhile, the house itself became a participant in their ordeal, doors refusing to open or close, windows fogging from the inside, and floors creaking with footsteps that belonged to no one present. Objects vanished only to reappear in odd places. Rowan's lighter tucked into the freezer, Eva's notebook soaked and torn on the bathroom floor. Even the clocks grew unreliable, hands spinning or freezing, as though time itself hesitated, at the threshold of whatever force pressed in from the cliffs. If you found this mystery intriguing, don't forget to comment and share. Another element emerged as the group's collective trust began to erode, not simply from fear, but from the slow, insidious suspicion that something was manipulating their thoughts. Conversations would derail midstream. Someone would begin a sentence only to fall silent, forgetting the point entirely. At night, whispers echoed through the halls, sometimes recognized as their own voices, sometimes not. It became unclear whether these were dreams or the song's influence worming its way deeper, repurposing their memories, threading their histories into something alien. Now, place yourself in their shoes. Imagine waking in the dark with the certainty that someone or something had been standing over your bed, only to find the room empty except for the echo of that mournful refrain. Further complicating matters, the environment outside the house became increasingly hostile. Birds that once populated the cliffs in noisy flocks vanished, replaced by a silence so profound it rang in their ears. The sea, usually a constant soothing backdrop, now seethed and churned, sending up spray that coated the windows in a film so thick it occluded the view entirely. Even the air tasted different, metallic and cold, as if each breath carried particles of something long dead and never meant for lungs. Within this new reality, moral choices became fraught with ambiguity. When Rowan suggested leaving immediately, the others hesitated, not simply out of fear, but out of a strange and magnetic pull that held them fast. The idea of escape receded, replaced by an inexplicable sense of obligation, as if abandoning the place would be a betrayal of some ancient pact. They were left to wonder whether these impulses were their own, or the product of the song's relentless invasion. This erosion of agency The sense that their choices might no longer be their own became the most terrifying revelation of all, leaving them balanced on the edge of reason, staring into the abyss with no certainty of where they ended. And the song began. Don't miss out. Subscribe and hit the bell for more spine-chilling tales.